Good afternoon. I'm calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'm joined by Council Members Fry, Cano, and Andrew Johnson, and we are a quorum of the committee and able to do business today. And we have one item on our agenda today, and it is a discussion item, although we, again, do not plan to take an action today. And what we are doing is continuing our discussion of proposals to add to our 2015 state legislative agenda. And so I'm looking for who would lead us off. Ms. Bergman, and why don't you introduce how we're going to get into our discussion for today? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sasha Bergman from the IGR department. And as you may recall, 2 weeks ago on November 6th, we heard seven presentations from 4 different department areas, and today we plan to just continue on hearing presentations from 3 different departments. It'll be 5 total, and if it's okay with you, we'll just get started with Mike Kennedy from the Public Works Department to talk about the proposal on page 1 of the packet in front of you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Mike Kennedy, I'm the Director of Transportation, Maintenance, and Repair for the City of Minneapolis Public Works Department. I'm here today to talk about our legislative proposals to make some amendments to special laws relating to special service districts at the legislature. I'm going to put on the overhead here just a map that shows all of the current special service districts that we have in the City of Minneapolis. We have 16 of them out there, and two of those are going to come online here in January. There are a few of them, 3 of them, that are dormant at this time, but the rest of them are still very, very active. Some of you may be familiar with the concept that the special service districts in Minneapolis over time have been formed under 2 enabling sets of laws. We have what we call our legacy districts, or our special session districts, that have been formed prior to 2001. They were formed under a certain set of legislations that enable us to write ordinances to create the special service districts with their own set of rules. There's since 2001, we've been forming these special service districts under a general statute 428A that has a little bit different set of rules. It's very easy to get into the weeds on this. I'm going to try to keep this at a very high level and only talk about the very specific things that we are talking about proposing today in regard to the legacy districts, or the older special service districts. The list there differentiates between those 2. We have our special service districts established prior to 2001 and the ones afterwards, and that enumerates those. Our legislative objectives are to provide parity with respect to eligible services and advisory board requirements between special service districts established in Minneapolis prior to 2001 and SSDs established since 2001. The eligible services, the first thing we're talking about are what eligible services the service districts can provide. Advisory boards from several existing special service districts have expressed a desire to us for greater flexibility in the types of eligible services that their respective districts are allowed to provide. Examples of services and activities various districts have expressed an interest in potentially providing include marketing promotions, supporting online marketing activities, supporting online marketing efforts and special events that draw customers to the district. District planning, developing business district master plans and planning efforts to streetscape improvements, business community outreach and engagement activities, business recruitment and retention activities, and district operational and administrative services, to name a few. For special service districts established in Minneapolis prior to 2001, we refer to them internally as legacy districts or special or session districts, the types of potential services that a district may provide is limited to a very specific list of eligible services defined in the original statutes, in those Minnesota session laws. This list does not include the types of services prescribed above. There are 16 things that you can do that we can charge for in these special service districts, and we can't go outside that list. The Minnesota session laws, which have been amended several times over the years, pertain only to special service districts established in Minneapolis prior to 2001, as I've said. There are 11 legacy districts in Minneapolis, 8 of which are active and operational at the present time. And there's the list. For special service districts established in Minneapolis since 2001, Minnesota Statutes Chapter 428A, which applies to all municipalities statewide, allows cities to define eligible service districts via ordinance. As a result, there is a lack of parity among special service districts in Minneapolis with respect to eligible services, depending on when the district was established. Another thing that we're looking at is advisory board requirements. The provisions related to advisory boards outlined in Minneapolis special session laws and Minnesota statutes 428A are nearly identical, save for two particular differences. One, the session laws provide that the city shall create and appoint an advisory board, which advises the council on what they're going to do. Whereas 428A is more permissively provides that the city may create and appoint an advisory board. And two, the special session laws provide that all members of the advisory board shall be residents or property owners within the district, whereas 428A is silent on conditions and qualifications for advisory board members. Our recommended legislative amendments are: 1, to create parity between cities' legacy districts and the newer special service districts with respect to eligible services. Minneapolis should pursue legislative amendments that would allow for a broader range of potential services by amending the definition of eligible services in the Minneapolis specific session laws with the definition that is provided in 428A for special services provided in the Chapter 428A. What it says in 428 is, quote, special services has the meaning given in the city's ordinance, but special services may not include a service that is ordinarily provided through the city from general fund revenues of the city unless an increased level of service is provided in the special service district. So rather than this long list of things, we would like to replace that long list in the special laws with that same sentence that's lifted right out of 428A. To create parity between the city's legacy districts and the newer special service districts with respect to advisory board requirements, Minneapolis should pursue 2 relatively minor text amendments in the session laws. 1, replacing the word shall with may in reference to establishing the advisory boards, and 2, deleting the requirement that advisory board members be either residents or property owners within the district. The intent of the proposed amendments, again, is to provide the city's legacy districts with the same flexibility already available to the city's newer districts. In other words, we want to modernize the old special laws. The proposed amendments would apply only to special service districts in Minneapolis established prior to 2001. There would be no impact to special service districts in Minneapolis established since 2001. And similarly, there would be no impact on special service districts in any other cities within Minnesota. If and when the proposed amendments are enacted into law, the city could then amend the respective enabling ordinances for each of the legacy districts, which would provide these districts with the desired flexibility. The proposed legislative amendments, any subsequent ordinance amendments, would be permissive in nature and would not require that a legacy district provide any additional types of services if they don't choose to, or modify their existing advisory board composition. Similarly, the proposed amendments would not have any impact on those legacy districts that wish to maintain the status quo. And we have both of those things happening out there. We have some of our legacy districts would like to maintain the status quo. They're perfectly happy with what they have. There's others that would like to see these changes and have this parity and have the option to do other services. I'm going to anticipate an obvious question. It's a good question. Why not just have them convert over to 428A? If they want to have those things. There's kind of multiple reasons to that. Number one, you don't just convert. You have to completely let your existing district go and completely reestablish a new ordinance, a new law enabling it. So you'd have to go through all the requirements that take via 428A. And also, some of these districts are very small. We don't want to impose that on them at this time. Because there's a cost to doing that. Another difference is all the other differences between the two session laws and 428A. The method of assessments, petitioning requirements, there's many other requirements that would be different that they're not interested in pursuing. For instance, under the methods of assessment, the methodology for assessments under the special laws and 428 are different enough that you could have, in some cases, fairly profound differences in how those assessments are spread. And many of the legacy districts aren't interested in that. They're comfortable with the way it is and have put a lot of investment and time in convincing their ratepayers that this is correct and fair, and they wouldn't want to have to change that. Some of the districts have considered switching over to 428A to take advantage of some of these abilities to do extra services. But if we were to amend these laws as we have proposed, that may take that desire away or make it so that now they're satisfied that would give them enough change that they could do the things they want to do without all the pain of doing that. And some simply don't need those service changes. They're perfectly happy with what they've got. That is my presentation. I may have gone over my 3 to 5. I apologize for that. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Councilmember Frye has a question, and then Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So the changes are exclusively limited at this point to 1, the advisory positions, and 2, the benefits that a special service district or the legacy districts can provide?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Frye, that is correct. There are just 2 very simple things that we're looking at changing.
Okay. So just to be clear, I might as well just ask the question. So we are not looking at the assessment mechanism nor who is assessed? It's a primary concern of mine.
Right now, we are not looking at those changes. Those are policy changes that we could talk at separately, but right now we're focused on those two points.
Okay, I guess my question would be, how would the city go about lobbying for a set of principles that maybe that we're for, along with a set of principles that say we're against? And my biggest concern would be the allowance of residential with paying for the assessments to fund the districts themselves.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Frye, that would be something that we would consider as a city, as a policy, and then we would work with our partners at IGR and the Attorney's Office to make proposals in the same way we are now to the state legislature to talk about, have the conversation about making those sort of changes. We're operating under state law, so the changes have to happen at the state level.
I understand that, okay. But so we're pushing for a package of legislation, and I guess my question: if that package of legislation includes aspects that we are against, but there are other pieces that we are for. I mean, I know oftentimes it's sort of moved forward altogether. How do we?
So I'm just going to break in because I think Mr. Kennedy is here not for the strategy piece, okay, but for the substance of what would be the requested change and why. I do think your point about strategy actually brings up something that creates, this is actually quite a challenging proposal. It's and I know you took a while to explain it, but at the end it was clear really it's a couple of simple changes, but sometimes when you open that box up, you can't control what ends up being the end product. And I know, Councilmember Frye, you've been part of discussions about some things that have been proposed by other entities that we might not like in Minneapolis that would affect special service districts. So I think that's one reason changes around special service districts, which are more controversial than you might think, just by hearing the description, are sometimes challenging. I think the other issue, which is, again, more of a strategy piece, is that we have not yet had the opportunity to work through some of our partner organizations, like the League of Minnesota Cities, and so that might be another reason that we might want to think about what's the right strategy and who would be the best lead on a change like this for a chance of success. So just a couple items, but I thank you for that strategy question and some of the substantive questions. Councilmember Cano. Okay, so I will ask, are there other questions? I'm not seeing any, so I'll say thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. Appreciate it. I think we're on to our next Public Works item.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm Don Elwood, Director of Transportation Planning and Engineering for Minneapolis Public Works. Today I'm here to talk to you about the 10th Avenue Bridge Rehab Project. 10th Avenue is just downstream from the 35W Bridge. 10th Avenue is a historic open spandrel concrete arch bridge constructed in 1929 and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The bridge is an important pedestrian, bicycle, and motor vehicle river crossing. Over 9,900 motor vehicles and over 2,000 bikes and peds use this bridge every day. In addition to serving as a local river crossing, the bridge provides a vital link between the University of Minnesota's East and West Bank campuses and is an important alternative emergency route and reliever to large events at the university and the new stadium. The bridge became even more critical with the completion of the Central Corridor light rail line and the reduction of vehicle capacity on the Washington Avenue Bridge. Preserving this bridge for future use by multimodal transportation users is identified as a city infrastructure priority. After 40 years of service, the bridge was closed in 1970 and reopened again in 1978 after an extensive rehab. Over the past 36 years, the bridge has served the public well, but again, it's deteriorated. The primary cause of the deterioration is leaking joints in the bridge deck that have led to the deterioration of the deck, the floor beams, spandrel columns, arch ribs, and piers. A lot of terms from the engineering side. So we have a quick diagram that shows what are all these pieces that work together. In the green bridge deck, the floor beams run underneath the bridge deck. They're connected to the spandrel columns. Those are the vertical pieces that tie into the arch rib, which is what most people see on these river crossings, and then they're all connected at the piers. The floor joints in the bridge deck in that green piece, that's where the leaking is occurring and getting down into the rest of the structure. These are pictures from 1970 of the extensive deterioration that was occurring, and some more pictures from underneath the bridge. In 2008 and 2013, we did some field observations and the materials were sampled and collected as part of our preliminary engineering activities. The city provided access to the bridge with our snooper truck, which I also have a picture of later. The activities performed as part of the field work included the concrete sounding, concrete coring and thermography, and visual observations. When we went back out in 2013, we realized that there was a substantial increase in deterioration of the components subsequent to the 2008 work. Here's our bridge folks hanging out over the bridge. I'm not sure who took the picture of the people in the basket. I haven't quite figured that out, but I don't know how they got there. Findings for the deck and the floor beams. The top of the deck has map cracking, which is spider cracking across the deck. The bottom of the deck is in fair condition. The locations adjacent to the deck joints are in poorer conditions. The floor beams have similar variability in condition. And at locations at the supporting deck joints, the condition is poor. Here's some quick photos of what's going on there today or recently in 2013. The spandrel columns and the arch ribs, the spandrel columns, those are those vertical pieces that went into the purple arch ribs. The lower portions of the spandrel columns are from 1929, and the components near the deck joints show more deterioration. And the arch ribs, which are critical to the bridge support, they're also showing their age, and we're getting cracking at the corners. That's typical, and localized spalling. That's where the concrete just starts popping off of the rusted metal. Here's some pictures of the cracking and the spalling that's going on the spandrels where they connect to the arch ribs. Full rehabilitation of the project of the bridge is recommended. It would consist of replacing the deck and the parapet, the arch spans, the floor beams, the spandrel columns, the piers, and the arches. In addition, we'd put cathodic protection, which is a electrical protection to prevent some of the rusting. Not electrical, sorry. And estimated project cost right now is at $42 million. So we are going to be seeking all sorts of funding from state, federal, our local state aid dollars, and our local money as well for the project. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elwood. I have to say it was just a wonderful presentation to kind of break down this very complicated project, so thank you. But also it's a big number. And I do know that there's sort of a uniqueness that is getting some traction with some legislators and trying to understand what's the state's role in looking at bridges that are owned by a local jurisdiction that are these major river crossings, which are just phenomenally expensive to properly maintain and replace or repair, whatever the case may be. So we may hopefully be able to be part of that conversation as a way to work on this critical bridge. Councilmember Fry. Hope that was from before. So, I mean, just the other thing I will say is that this is a bridge that also has a lot of importance to the University of Minnesota, and we have been updating them on the project as well, and just looking at how we continue to work collaboratively with our partners on this. So, thank you. I'm not seeing any questions, so thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Dave Herberholz. I'm the Director of Solid Waste and Recycling, and I'm pleased to be here to talk about some mattress product stewardship. And got a small slideshow here that want to give a little overview of where we're at and how we deal with mattresses a little bit and why it's a problem and what a potential solution is. So mattresses are a problem material. They take up space in landfills. They are problematic to incinerators where our waste goes at HERC, and 82% of the mattress can be recycled. With our program, mattresses were prohibited from being disposed of at HERC in 2012. That focus was on Minneapolis only, primarily because we are the largest customer of HERC, and we also control our waste, able to manage our waste better than some private haulers and some other contracts, and then some of the commercial stream going in there. We contract with Momentum, which was formerly PPL, to have the material recycled. That's also supported by Hennepin County. Right now we're collecting upwards of 34,000 mattresses per year at an expense of $600,000. So that besides it being a bulky material, the expense itself is a huge problem. And the chart there actually shows that initially when we started out part-time in 2012, we spent almost $300,000, and we've tracked at that approximately $600,000. Could go even higher this year because that figure of $541,000 is only for the 3 quarters of the year. So as I said, the significant expense, but also it's a health and safety issue. So we've got quite a bit of illegal dumping that's spread out throughout the city, and the operational cost to get it the material recycled is $18 per mattress. You see from the pictures, our pickups will collect the material. We try to consolidate it at our 2710 Pacific site, and then haul it over to get recycled at PPL. And then our contractor MRI is also collecting and delivering there. And then PPL is also involved with collecting curb or alley side for our crews. Partners in a potential support of the program, and that there's right now there's many parties that actually support it, and I don't know of anybody that does not support some product stewardship for mattresses. A few of them local here, the Minnesota Product Stewardship Council, which I happen to be a member of. Mattress Recycling Council is an offshoot of the International Sleep Products Association, an international organization that has been involved in product stewardship legislation. The MPCA, naturally, RAM, coordinating board, and then our recycler, and then local municipalities. I didn't have Hennepin County on here, but they're also would be a potential partner. So proposed solution is to have some extended producer responsibility legislation to possibly introduce in the next legislative session, and then have a more expanded full campaign in 2016. And prime players in this would be the state, the MPCA, and then the Mattress Recycling Coalition or Council, because of their experience in advancing some of the state laws that are in effect. And with that, there's really only 3 states right now that have extended producer responsibility mattress recycling laws. Connecticut was the first in mid-2013, Rhode Island in July of 2013, and California in the end of last year. And all of these laws right now, they've been signed, but they have not been implemented. And the first implementation of a program should begin in early 2015 in Connecticut. And the bottom line in this is that they garnish support for the law, and they've got parties that are partnering in it, but there's a separate product stewardship organization that's involved in managing the program. So there's like for example, in Connecticut, there's a $9 point of sale fee on mattresses that goes into a pool of money then that will fund the infrastructure for recycling mattresses. And that is a similar program that is going to be rolled out in Rhode Island and California, and I would think that we would, in the state of Minnesota, would model that program. So with that, I'll open up any questions.
Thanks. I'm not seeing questions from others right now. I think you laid out nicely the program and really the choice before us, which is whether we take this on as a lead organization, if that's wise to do this year, or wait until other organizations have kind of stepped forward a little bit more, which looks like that's geared towards 2016. When we would be more of a support on this. I will say kind of the one thing that I think is really helpful is to understand how widespread product stewardship is, regardless of kind of where the mattress industry piece is, because product stewardship is very common. It has a lot of examples in Minnesota alone, and it's this concept, of course, that if you make a product or you're manufacturing a product, you should incorporate into the cost of that what may be some unique disposal costs that really should be part of what is the full cost of the product. And I think when it's explained that way and some of these other examples are used, it really makes a lot of sense. So thank you for the presentation, and I'm not seeing any questions. So
thank you.
Am I next?
Madam Chair, we're going to move on to the city clerk's office for an elections-related proposal. Very excited about each of them.
They're all exciting proposals. Thank you, Melissa. Good afternoon, Chair Glidden, members of the committee. My name is Anissa Hollingshed. I'm a management analyst in the Office of City Clerk, and I am here today on behalf of our Elections and Voter Services Division. We are seeking permissive legislation to allow jurisdictions expanded options in providing assistance to voters with limited English proficiency. Specifically, we would like the option to have interpreters in the polling place. Under such legislation, expanding this assistance and the level at which it would be done would be a policy decision that could be made by each individual jurisdiction. Here in Minneapolis, the importance of this issue has been growing with every election. As one of the people who has been directly involved in voter outreach and education work in the city, I can say that this is both a wonderful and a challenging problem. We want all of our residents who are eligible to vote to have the opportunity to do so, but the barriers to casting a ballot increase for voters who are not experienced and proficient English speakers. We are pursuing a range of strategies to increase our outreach and education efforts to all voters, but we feel strongly that having the option to provide independent interpreters in polling places is one key piece of this work that would greatly enhance our ability to serve our residents. It's worth noting that Minneapolis is not subject to the language minority provisions of the Voting Rights Act, nor is any jurisdiction in Minnesota. covered language minorities under the Voting Rights Act are also limited to language speakers of American Indian background, Asian Americans, Alaskan Natives, and Spanish heritage citizens, so not African heritage citizens, and none of those single language groups in Minnesota meet the identified threshold for coverage under the federal law. If we did meet those thresholds, we would be required by federal law to provide any of our registration or voting materials, notices, forms, instructions, and assistance in that language as well. So although we're not required right now by federal law, because we feel it's important to serving our residents well, we have produced translated materials in recent election cycles, and we've also tried to address language needs in the polling places through the use of bilingual election judges. However, in addition to the challenge of recruiting enough election judges to adequately meet the needs of multiple languages across the city's 125 polling places, we also have limitations in state law that require 2 election judges of different major political parties to provide assistance to voters when they're marking a ballot. So that further constrains our ability to provide language assistance via election judges. In 2014, we explored the use of independent interpreters in the polls, but we found we could not do so under the current provisions of state law. And so that's what we're asking to change and look at the state law regarding conduct in and near polling places, and specifically the individuals that are allowed to be in the polling place. While Minneapolis is not the only jurisdiction in the state with residents with limited English proficiency, we are the state's largest city and among the most diverse. We've also found that in our work on existing voter outreach and education efforts, that many other jurisdictions are not yet undertaking their own efforts, but they're watching closely what we're doing and looking at the practices that we are successfully piloting to then put into practice. So in this manner, it seems like movement on this issue at a state level will need to be led by Minneapolis and ultimately will serve to benefit residents across the state. It's an issue that will increase in prominence throughout the state as more diverse residents continue to become engaged in the electoral process. This year's election saw in St. Cloud Somali candidates for city council, in Roseville a Hmong candidate for city council, as just a couple of examples. So we are working with our own contacts with peers at other jurisdictions, as well as with the IGR staff, to identify and build potential supportive partners to move this forward. We're also pursuing further conversations with the new administration and the Secretary of State's office to gauge their level of support. However, ultimately with the changes we're seeking, decisions about how to utilize interpreters will involve budgetary decisions and come down to policy choices that we want to be able to present to this body to make on behalf of the residents of Minneapolis.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there questions? Council President Johnson?
Just a question, Ms. Hollingshed. I just wonder what would qualify someone as a qualified interpreter, and I just am wondering about, that's, how do we determine that that person would be a neutral, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right, and that's something that we certainly would have to flesh out further and potentially even have the opportunity to have multiple interpreters deployed at a time, so there's some level of check and balance, but without the additional requirement of them being election judges, which requires them to be eligible voters in Minnesota, and having that party balance requirement as well. So anything that we can do to build some level of additional flexibility into the law and add to what we have now would be a great help.
Okay, thank you.
I just, that's a really very important point, I think, and I just don't know if this would be something where we would seek maybe the assistance of the Secretary of State's office in leading some kind of rulemaking process to guide this. I mean, I do think it is a very important point. There is a way, of course, that you're a certified interpreter, but that may not answer all the questions about neutrality that we may want some state guidance, even if it's a local choice to use the option. So I'm not seeing other questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, our final presentation today will be from the Human Resources Department from Mr. Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Bernardi. And as you're approaching, I'll just note that as this is a HR type issue, we are also joined by Jim Michaels, who's here, I think, just as part of the conversation on behalf of the Board of Business Agents. So thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Glidden, members of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. My name is Chuck Bernardi from the city's Human Resources Department. I also represent HR on the Policy Liaison Group and would like to thank IGR staff at this time, including members of Jean Ranieri's team, for their assistance in moving this policy forward and for their leadership on the Policy Liaison Group. And also would wanted to acknowledge Jim Michaels for being here today. He's worked with Tim Giles on working from a labor perspective with the city's members of the city's Labor Management Committee on the Rule of Three policy proposal as well. Because everyone may not know what the Rule of Three is, I thought I'd do a little bit of education first. What is the Rule of Three? The Rule of Three really refers to the number of candidates that can be certified to a hiring manager for consideration. The Rule of Three really came out of civil service, the civil service system. The civil service system was created at the federal level with the passage of the Pendleton Act way back in 1883. At that time, this was landmark legislation establishing the system for permanent federal employment based on merit rather than political party affiliation, which was also known as the patronage or spoils system. The Rule of Three we have, the city of Minneapolis has had a civil service system since at least 1913, I believe. In fact, I have a copy of the 1915 civil service rules that were given to me by a retired fire captain who was a neighbor of mine in South Minneapolis. The 1915 civil service rules required the city to follow the Rule of One. So going back forward 65 years to 1978, special state law was passed that increased the Rule of One to Rule of Three. The state law states in part, notwithstanding any contrary provisions of the charter of the city of Minneapolis, when there is a vacancy in the classified service, other than in the category of unskilled labor, the Civil Service Commission shall certify the first three persons from the appropriate list of the eligible register. So going forward back to 1913, from 1913 to 1978, the city was subject to the Rule of One. From 1978 to present, we've had the Rule of Three. We have had some alternative certification procedures achieved through the collective bargaining process, with most of those occurring in the mid-1990s. Context and scope. Trying to give you an idea of what the impact of this is, but first I'd like to tell you about the city's employment structure or employee structure. The city has really four types of employment categories within two broad categories. We have the classified service and we have the unclassified service. The Rule of Three applies only to the classified service, but that's where 96% of our employees are. Within the classified service, we have represented employees, meaning they're represented by a labor union, which is comprised of about 92% of the workforce, or about 3,500 employees. We also have non-represented employees, which comprise about 4% of the workforce, or just over 150 people in that group. We also have the unclassified service, which are outside of civil service rules. We have appointed employees, which is usually your department heads and their direct reports, which comprises about 3% of the workforce. And we also have politically appointed employees. Those are the individuals appointed by the mayor and the city council members. Context and scope. The Rule of Three covers all non-represented positions in the classified service. It also covers, in total, it covers about 46% of all city positions in the classified service. The other 54% that are not included there are covered by collective bargaining agreements that have negotiated a different certification procedure process. What I want to try to show you here on this slide is a hypothetical eligible list. In this case, it's for the position of HR generalist. The position of HR generalist is non-represented, meaning it's not represented by a collective bargaining agreement and is subject to the civil service rules. Before the eligible list is even created, the HR department will create a job posting and announce the position. The HR department will accept applications. The HR department will screen those applications. They will administer some type of an examination or screening device. They will then rank the candidates and establish the eligible list. And then they will certify the names to the hiring manager. In this particular example, we have a list of 6 people. They're ranked 1 through 6, scores ranging from 89.5 to 94.5. Because this particular position is non-represented and subject to civil service rules and thus the special state law, the city's Human Resources Department can only refer the top 3 people to the hiring manager in the situation. So even though candidate 4, Stu, who's an HR employee, scored only 1 point behind candidate 3, they are not eligible to be interviewed at this time. Also, candidate EFG, a former urban scholar, also would not receive an interview because even though they scored an 89.5 and ranked 6th. So in essence, one has to ask themselves, just because an individual scored a few points higher on an exam, should we exclude other candidates, other qualified candidates for consideration for at least a job interview? Why change the special state law is needed? Changing the state law supports city goals. One Minneapolis, a city that works. It's a sound human resource practice. Having the flexibility to interview a sufficient number of candidates increases the city's ability, our ability, to continue to build a highly qualified workforce and one that is more inclusive and diverse. We have a very competitive labor market. It's getting more competitive with unemployment declining, retiring baby boomers, and increased competition for skilled labor. When we have rule of 3, we often do additional testing, which takes more time, and the more time it takes to hire people, we often lose qualified or quality candidates. In closing, we have broad support from city leaders, including members of the Policy Liaison Group, to change the 1978 special state law that mandates the city of Minneapolis use the rule of 3. Timothy Giles has been working with members of labor to draft a revision to state law that would repeal Chapter 511, the special state law enacted in '78. The proposed legislation would enable the city to use an alternative certification procedure for non-represented positions. Moreover, it describes the process the city and labor would use to negotiate an alternative to the rule of 3 through the collective bargaining process. The city was subject to the rule of 3 for at least 65 years. The city has now been subject to the rule of 3 for over 35 years. These certification procedures were developed during a different time in history. Isn't it time for the city to move forward, trying to change the state law to provide our organization with a less restrictive mechanism to determine how many qualified people can be interviewed for a job? The Human Resources Department requests that the IGR Committee consider adding the Rule of 3 policy proposal to the city's 2015 legislative agenda. Thank you very much.
All right, any questions for Mr. Bernardi? Not seeing any. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michaels. And IGR team, Ms. Bergman, did you have any last words? All right, so I believe with that we have concluded with our presentations for today. Again, our planned course of action is to receive and file these, and then at our next scheduled IGR meeting, we will start the consideration process and comparing our 2014 agenda to what is proposed for 2015. There are also some formatting changes that I think are going to be proposed by IGR staff team, and we'll be able to start viewing those as well as we prepare for the 2015 session. So with that, I will move to receive and file. All in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That is received and filed, and we have concluded our business, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much.